All right, welcome to another Conversations with My Friend is what I'm calling them these early days. We'll get a name for this show eventually, but this is not his first time on my channel, which I actually just put on the podcast feed not too long ago, kind of like going back to the archives. But I think it's kind of cool because the subject we're going to talk about today, I think we could use the same headline from the last time. Advisors like us are really out here. And like we're going to be talking about the way that you and I kind of view financial planning, and it's not the way that most do. So like advisors like us are really out there. But before we get to that, I want you to give an intro to my audience, Sam, for those that are new. And as we kind of build this platform out, your future fans that are always going to show up when Samuel Deane's on.
Well, first off, JC, it's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You cut. This is
always.
Conversations with Friends. You don't need to thank me for being here or none of that shit.
It's still a pleasure to be here, man. But for those who aren't as familiar, I'm Samuel Deane. I'm a founder and president of Aurora Wealth. We're an independent wealth management firm for tech employees and startup founders, as well as business owners. And I've been running my firm since 2018. So what is that? Seven years now. Started from the scratch.
He's good with numbers, folks.
Yeah.
Give him your money.
Started my firm from scratch with no assets, no revenue, no clients. Like my first client was my mom. So I know, how it is to build a firm from scratch. I was 26 years old, so not even that much life experience. And so running my firm has given me the opportunity to not only grow as an advisor, but grow as a person, as a dad, as a husband. And I think that also translates into me being an advisor and how I approach financial planning, which is what we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about. So I'm excited to be here. I'm going to try to take off like my advisor hat and put on my friend hat, and we're just kicking it like we do in the group chat.
I was going to allude to that Sam is one of my closest friends. And I've known him pretty close to when he launched his firm.
Yeah.
And so we do have a group chat with our buddy Nas. Nas will be in the rotation as well. So you all get to meet Nasir Smith here before too long. I do want you to keep the advisor hat on a little bit, but I just want the conversation to be relaxed and just exposing people to a different way of viewing planning. There's one thing I did want to highlight before. And you don't have to talk too much about your personal life, but I do think it's very important that you also, or I highlight the father and husband that you are as well. Sam is a very supportive and awesome husband. His wife, Kim, is a successful entrepreneur herself. They've got 3 beautiful kids. So you don't have to put all of the family business out there, but I just also want to make sure that people know that, like, yes, you've built this firm, but you've also done it while being a present father and supportive husband, and how important that is to you. I don't want people to lose sight of that. This whole podcast is about living our authentic life, and you are living your authentic life. It's not a traditional way of doing things, and you're having success both in and out of the office. So I just wanted to highlight that as well.
I appreciate that, man. I think, we talk about the struggles of parenting and being a business owner, especially when you're in a dual entrepreneur household, and having 3 kids. So exactly what that feels like. And, we talked the other day about, your business coach and whether he's a life coach or a business coach. And you mentioned that, well, your life and your business go hand in hand. It's not really about work-life balance. It's about like, how do we integrate both of them so that I'm happy in both realms? And so my family has been a huge reason as to why I am where I am today. Like maybe we'll get into the full background or the full history of how I got here, but my wife and I have been like operating as a team from day zero. And so I couldn't be more thankful for having that experience and that partnership.
I'm curious, when you think about integrating work and family life, how do you view it? Do you view it as integrating personal life into business, or do you integrate it business into personal life? And it sounds like it's the same, but I think it's different, and I just want to see what you say and just wrap on this a bit.
That's interesting. I think if I had to choose, it's more bringing business into personal. And I'll say why. I think bringing personal into business, the first thing when you said that came to my mind is like, how often am I talking about like my family and my kids and my goals and like the things that we're doing with clients? Whereas I'm more than willing to be open and transparent with them, but only if like they're asking, well, hey, what are you doing? Or what are your personal thoughts on so-and-so? And so I think the latter, bringing my business life into my personal life, is sort of what I lean more towards because, like, look, I tell people as long as I'm awake, I'm working. And one thing I learned from you is that, like, seeing how awesome of a dad you are, you got probably about 10 years on me, even though it
Yeah.
looks and feels like there's no age difference. One thing I got from you was that, like, you take all your kids to practices and you sit there and you're with them, and there are times where you sit in the car and you work from your laptop while they're in
Mhm.
practice doing what they do. And I remember you having a conversation with Roman, and you were kind of like, "Hey, look, like, yes, me and your mom, we're always around. We're always going to support you. We're always going to be at those games. But the trade off on weekends, on weekdays, at night times, travel, whenever, but the trade, which most kids don't have with their parents, but the trade off is that I may have to work when most parents aren't working."
Right.
And that really stuck with me, and it's something that I live by. My kids are starting to get a little older now, so my oldest wants to go to Target every day after school to get a new toy to come home and play with, and I'm like, I have to work, and he's like, you have to work for money so we can go to Target, and I'm like, yeah, little guy, I have to work.
Mhm.
So he knows that his mom works at the studio and his dad works on the computer or on the phone. And I think it's just I love exposing my kids to that side of me because
Mhm.
we are always around. I don't want to give them the false impression that that's the case for the majority of people. So yeah, I definitely enjoy intertwining my business with my personal life, and I would say that's the same for my wife as well.
That all makes sense, and I totally agree with that. I was thinking of it, and you got there, but I was thinking about like, okay, I integrate my business into my personal life,
Hmm.
and when I think about that, what I mean is my personal life is the foundation. I build my business into fit within my personal life.
Mm.
Where some people are like, okay, I've got my business. Where can I plug in my personal life? I'm like, okay, here's my personal life. Here's the things that are most important. How do I fit my business in with that? And like, so I think of it from the lens of like my priority is the personal family. And
Understood.
the work that we do, we're very fortunate that we can be able to build our business, around our family and fit into the family life that we want. But to your point, that means sometimes we're working on weekends. Sometimes like we don't need to be present at practice. And now, especially as they get older, like I think it's hilarious that these parents, like Romans 15, so AAU tryouts or workouts with trainers, like parents will go in and watch it. And I'm like, what, like, why are you watching? Like, this is for them. It's
Mhm.
not for you. Don't put added pressure to the situation by mom or dad be sitting in there the whole time watching. Like, surely there's something else you could do. Like, whether it's work, like that's when I do a lot of writing, or go walk laps around the parking lot. Like, get some steps in or something. But so yeah. So, anyways, you're.
I see what you're saying, and I agree. I think I do that more subconsciously than
Mhm.
intentionally, or maybe I do it intentionally, but maybe I'm at the point now where sometimes I take it for granted. Like 2 days ago, I my son, we are able to go to his school and have lunch with him whenever we want. It's at 10:30, and he comes home from school at 2:30 now. So now I basically just restructured my schedule to where I'm handling all my meetings before 2 p.m. And so after 2 p.m. I can like either hang out with him or do some work that doesn't require 110% focus and those sorts of things. But I definitely enjoy having the flexibility to shape my business life around my family life because that truly is what drives me. Like the family aspect does drive the business aspect, and so I totally agree with that sentiment.
Since I am older, and thank you for reminding me that, I'll give you one thing to pay attention to, and then we'll dive into today's topic. Eventually, as they get older, they're going to learn how to take advantage of the fact that we can work from home and different things. Like the example being, Silas knows when he comes home from school, he's supposed to read and do some math homework. But usually, like if I'm home, I'm doing some work, I might be having my 3 o'clock meeting and just usually working on stuff for the store. So he knows he can come in, put his stuff down, talk to us a little bit, and then when we start to work, slide upstairs and go play video games. And he can probably get a good 30, 45 minutes of video games in before we realize he's not doing it. So, like, for a while, they'll struggle with, well, you're home. Shouldn't you be able to play? Then they'll get it. And they're like, they're distracted. Let me go do this thing that I'm really not supposed to do. So just be on the lookout of that.
So I was thinking one.
All right, so I wrote something down. I want to see first off if you know where I got it, and then this is the kickoff to our conversation for today. So there's some words beforehand, but the quote I took is an empathetic discovery process and therapy-like approach to financial planning. Where'd I get that from?
That's the Rory way, man.
Yes, yes. So I feel like for some people, again, we're both financial advisors. This is
Yep.
not a financial podcast, no advice or anything here. But for most people, if they hear a financial advisor describe their process as empathetic discovery process, empathetic being the key, and therapy-like approach. Now, you're not a therapist, but therapy-like to financial planning. They're like, what? What does that even mean? So what does that even mean, and why did you choose that as copy for your website?
This is a very interesting question because I think that was something that I actually kind of pushed back on a little bit with the designer that we worked with. So we worked with John and his team over at Objective Brand, and I think one of the pages, I think it might have been on our About Us or our process on our website, it says, "Welcome to your financial therapy." And immediately I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of like not necessarily what I wanted to like jump out and portray. And so I had a chat with him, and you know, he's a really good designer. And what he did was he had interviews with some of my, I guess, some clients who were open to kind of giving their feedback on what it was like working with me and the firm. And every single person said, you know, I was surprised about how like human he was and how like it wasn't really focused on all the technicals. Yes, we discussed the numbers, but he cared more about like what we wanted to accomplish out of life. Like we don't necessarily focus on investment returns, although that's something that's important. Like the objective is what brings you fulfillment, right? And like helping them use their money in a way that actually makes them happy and not necessarily just doing the things that they think they're supposed to do. And when he mentioned that every single client said something about that, it really it really stood out like what that differentiator was. And it wasn't at that point in time, I don't think it was something I was necessarily trying to do. It was just something that was natural to me. And so that's kind of how that copy made it in there. I think if it was up to me, and you know, it is up to me, but if I was kind of doing this on my own, it's not something I would have included. And I'm super thankful that like that's the type of comfort level that we can sort of create for our clients. But ultimately, what that language is basically saying is that like investment returns matter, savings matter, money matters, all the quantitative stuff matters, but you can be unhappy with a lot of money, right? And ultimately we want to help you live a life where you're using your money to make you happy. You're using your money to make your family happy, to do the things you actually care about. Like when I talk to people and they say, we want to, retire early as an example. And I'm like, why? And they're like, oh, well, we want to travel. We want to do this, that, and the third. And my response is usually, well, why can't you do those things while working? Why do you need to be retired? And just really just getting to the bottom of what it is they really want out of life is how I would describe the sentence you mentioned in the most like simplest terms. And I don't think it's unfortunate, but I don't think most financial advisors approach it that way. I think when we operate in the circles that we operate in, I would say a fairly good amount of financial advisors in the independent space would say that, they're focused on their clients' goals and values and what they really want out of life. And they're not necessarily like investment focused. But when you look at, the larger industry, we're definitely a minority amongst the industry as a whole. And so I still think that that's our competitive edge. I think it always will be. At least for a certain group of people. Maybe everyone may not need that approach, right? There may be some people that know exactly what they want out of life and they just need someone to help them make it happen from a numbers and planning perspective, and that's fine. But for the folks that may not be as clear, we just enjoy taking that approach.
I had to do a real quick lift. I always get confused about like right side, left side brain and what is what. So like, yeah, most of our profession is left side. That's the analytical side. It's numbers. So they don't have that. It's not natural for a lot of financial advisors, and that's a blanket statement, but to have the empathetic approach. And like empathetic is an important word, I think, because it's used a lot in Evoke process, the kinder life planning that I went through. Like empathy is a big part of the listening process. And when you experience that as a client, because I experienced it in the process, like I sat on the other side of the table of a financial advisor and I was life planned. And an empathetic listener is there truly listening with no agenda and giving you space to figure things out. I would imagine that most people's experience with a financial advisor is, when do you want to retire? How much are you saving? Like it's just right to it and real quick, so we can go run off and run these numbers and show you this awesome plan that is leading you to a life that may or may not be what you really want. I'm going to push back and challenge you to say, I don't think most people know what they want. And I do think most people need the approach that we're trying to bring to the space. And there's a lot, I mean, we are the minority, but there are a lot of us who are moving in this direction. Like I believe that life planning, human focus, whatever you want to call it, is the future of the profession. I think most people need that because the society we've grown up in has a lot of beliefs, a lot of possibilities, a lot of what we're supposed to do has been placed on us. And most of us wouldn't choose that if we were given the choice. And a lot of us don't realize we have more choice than we really are aware of. Now, having choice doesn't mean it's easy, but we do have choice. We do have agency. We can change the path. And so while I think everybody would benefit from it, I also don't think everybody is ready to do it. And so I think that the work that you and I do, the tough thing is people really have to be open and wanting to dive deeper to figure out what money really means to them and why do they want what they want, and to be challenged in their beliefs because like it's emotional. That's why it's therapy. Like, okay, you want to retire. Why? Like you could even press further about like, well, why do you want to travel so much? And like at the end of it, they find out there's some reason they weren't even aware of that's been in their subconscious since they were a little kid, that they heard their parents say something that shaped their whole worldview. And then now that they know that, well, the reason they want to travel so much is when they were little, they heard their dad say how that was his biggest goal in life and he never got to do it and he has this regret. And that's in their head for some reason that they don't even remember. And now that they know that's the reason why, like now we can change behaviors. We can make sacrifices because this thing is that important and I now understand why. You don't get there with a questionnaire. You don't get there with a financial planning software. You get there through questions and empathetic listening and borderline some therapy sometimes.
That actually reminds me of a conversation I had with a client a while ago where she mentioned to me that I think she might have been like 32 at the time, and she said she wanted to retire at 40. And I was so, it's become a lot more popular now, but I was kind of taken back at the time, like, I'm wonder like why? Like, and after maybe 2 years of working together and like continuing to push the envelope on that and trying my best to ask the right questions to really get to the root, we realized that, well, her mom passed away when she was in her mid 30s and never really got a chance to enjoy life or to enjoy like her retirement savings or anything like that. And so this is her wanting to kind of take that power back and not have the same fate that her mom had. And like when we came to that realization, it was a really powerful moment in our planning because maybe it's not like a full retirement that makes sense. Maybe it's like an untraditional working style where maybe you work 10 years or you work 5 years and you take a year off or something, along those lines. And fortunately she works in tech. And so it's not uncommon to kind of grind for a couple of years and then take some time off and continuing doing that. And so I think that's super important, right? But that we would have never, like you mentioned, we would have never gotten to that if I focused on, well, what investment returns do you need to retire at 40, and what does your income planning look like and your spending looks like if you retire at 40 with your another 45-year time horizon and those sorts of things. And so I really do think that the best advisors in our industry that focus on life planning, they focus on just asking the right questions and not necessarily like telling the client what they should do, but asking the right questions in a way that allows the client themselves to come to that realization of what they should do. And I will say that, there was a point in time where I thought I was doing life planning, when it was really just me like caring about the people that I'm working with and viewing them beyond just like numbers and investment accounts and assets and all those sorts of things. And I remember I had a critical point in my personal life where we reached out to you for life planning because you actually went through like the full kinder process, got the life planning designation, and did the whole thing. And I don't think, as someone who manages money for a living and helps people for a living, I I guess I tend to not pay as much attention to the things that I want from my life and the business that we're building and the life that we want for our kids. But it wasn't until we went through that process with you where a lot of things became obvious to me that weren't obvious before. A lot of things in terms of like what my wife wanted became obvious to me that weren't obvious before. And it just allowed me to see what sitting on the other side of that felt like and what that like realization felt like. Like I left that engagement with you, and I tell people all the time, you're like my I have you on retainer for life planning, even though it's a free retainer. But I think experiencing that and being on that side of the table made me so much more determined to have all of my clients feel that. But like you said, there has to be a moment where they're ready to, right? And a prime example of that is one of our biggest clients. He became very wealthy off of his company going public. He decided to resign, move abroad, get married. His wife ended up resigning as well, and they were contemplating whether or not they wanted to actually live abroad or move back to the States. And we went through the life planning process. I obviously, we talked, and you gave me some pointers and those sorts of things, and we went through that process. And honestly, I think we were working together for maybe 2 to 3 years at that time, and I think that process is what solidified the relationship with me and that client. I think that allowed them to see me in a whole new light that I don't think any other financial advisor could have provided if they weren't necessarily focusing in this space. And so like they were at a point where it's like, okay, we have all this money. Now what do we do? Do we live overseas? Do we move back to New York? Do we start a family? If we do decide to start a family, where do we want to be? Do we want to be around our family? Do we want to be overseas where things are a little bit easier from a work-life balance perspective? There were so many questions left unanswered, but they had the space to think about it. And I, I want to say that I asked the right questions to help them come to the realizations themselves, and they ended up moving back to New York. And I'd say they're pretty happy with where they are now. And so I certainly think that going through that experience allowed me to really understand the importance and motivated me to make sure that all of my clients felt that at some point in our relationship when they're ready.
There's a couple things that you said I want to circle back on. One of them is, I forget exactly how you said it, but you didn't put your views on your client. So
I try
I'm sure
not.
there'll be
I try not to, at least.
I'm sure there'll be advisors that watch this just because I've been an advisor for 20 years. So like for the advisors, but also for people who will be working with advisors, like I personally believe it is not my place to put my views onto you. So for your client that wants to retire at 40, 95% of advisors are going to be like, that's not possible. You're going to need, like, they're going to shoot it down before it's ever possible. And if you shoot down someone's dream before they have a chance to even share why and put it out there, like, it can't happen. Like, she may have, if she would have talked to another advisor, she may have given up on that dream and potentially miss out on an amazing life. When the reality of it is, we shouldn't tell you if that's possible or not. Like, let's figure out why so you really understand why. Let me put on my advisor hat. Let me go to the left brain, run some numbers, and show you what is going to be necessary for that to happen. And let's be creative and figure out some ways that we can work around maybe some of the obstacles. And then you decide if it's worth the sacrifice. Who is it to me to say that you shouldn't go fire movement and eat rice and beans every single day and drive a beater so you can retire at 40? Like, I don't want that. I want to find balance, but this is not my life.
Yeah.
My job is not to lead you to what I want your life to be. My job is to lead you to the life that you want to go to. I think that's a very, very important distinction between what I call traditional financial planning and what the life planning is really about. And that's where the empathy comes in. So I wanted to highlight that advisors should try not to put their views onto the clients, not to put their limitations onto the client, because your limitations may not be theirs. Mm-hmm. Like, I am an optimistic person. The sky is the limit. I can do anything that I want. Don't tell me I can't do it, because I don't want you limiting me. You might not believe in yourself, but I believe in me. And we have clients that have that mindset. That was the first thing. The second thing is, one of my favorite things that I do with couples in the life planning process is not something that we're taught to do in the Kinder process, but I did it with you and Kim the first time. I hope you don't mind me saying Kim's name. Like, they could look it up. So the first, and the really cool thing is so in the life planning process, the Kinder process that I use, we create a vision. Like, I listen to you, ask these questions, you come up with a vision, and I recite it back to you to hopefully plant this vision in your head and kick off the process of manifestation. Yes, it's the process of manifestation. I'm not going to shy away from it. But it's really fun to ask the spouse or the partner who's there, did you learn anything new?
Oh yeah, that's my favorite.
And every time, mm-hmm. the answer has been yes. And mm-hmm. the thing is, we know what we want, and we have this vision for our life and our combined lives. And sometimes we just naturally assume that, like, okay, they're picking up on these things, or they know. So it's really cool to see how couples can even get a little bit closer to the relationship. Like, I had one recently where, the husband was talking about his desire to be a grandfather. And so we go through this whole thing, and I asked the wife, and, hey, did you learn anything new? She said, I've never heard him talk about being a grandfather like that. Like, it warmed my heart. It made me, like, feel so good. It was, like, really, really cool.
Yeah.
And so, like, would you think a financial advisor would help you see a side of your partner that you mm-hmm. never saw before? Mm-hmm. No, but that's really, really cool. Like, mm-hmm. it's cool.
I agree.
And then the third thing I wanted to bring up is, we keep on talking about Kinder, and people by now should know who George Kinder is and the Institute. But, like, this process that Sam and I are referring to, the Evoke process, like, it's not a secret. He wrote a book called Life Planning for You. You can go to Amazon, and anybody can order Life Planning for You, and this process that we're talking about is laid out in there. Now, I don't think that you going through the book yourself will give you the same experience as hiring a life planner. You can go, I think the Kinder website has a list of them, but you can find us out there. But if you're curious what it's like, and to try to get a visualization of what the relationship would be like in the process, like, go read the book. Do some of the work yourself. Like, the exercises that we give to our clients are in there. So this is not a secret, but I do think that there is something special about having somebody else sitting on the other side of the table of you to help you through that process. But what we're talking about is not a secret. It's out there if you want to explore it. You mentioned that this process, like, felt natural to you, and that's kind of how I was. Like, Scott Frank was my introduction to life planning, mm-hmm. maybe 2 years into starting my firm. But when I listened to him, like, a lot of that was like, well, of course we would ask those types of questions. Like, that's just naturally how I am. Like, I always wanted to know why. Do you know why why it seemed natural to you? Like, why do you think that was the way that you were already drawn to doing the business?
I think one of the best parts about my journey specifically is that, and I say this all the time to you, is that I didn't spend a ton of time in our industry as an advisor before mm-hmm. I came out and launched my own firm. And so a lot of the early years, I was kind of leaning on prior experiences I had, non-advisor experiences that I had, and was just putting in the work and learning. Mm-hmm. And so I think many advisors go through, like, this training program where they're just taught how to, like, sell. And by the time I became an advisor, I think that culture was shifting. I don't think it's shifted, but I think it still is shifting towards more of the holistic planning that we do. because I wasn't as confident in my technical knowledge as like others may be, I just decided to lean on other strengths. Like I at least knew more than the person I was sitting across from, and so I was still competent enough to kind of help them do things that they weren't already doing. And I just kind of leaned into what I thought was my strengths at the time. And again, I just genuinely cared. Like I didn't get into this business for the money, although I know that this is one of the few industries where you could make a ton of money by helping other people make money. And that's what I love about it. But that wasn't necessarily why I became a financial advisor. First and foremost, I became a financial advisor because it allowed me to do two things. It allowed me to marry my interest for like the stock market and investing with my interest of being a business owner. I don't think I would be a financial advisor if it didn't give me the opportunity to be a business owner. It may just have been something I was doing on my own. And so having the opportunity to select who I got to work with and like be that trusted person for them, helping them being that guide through life and just like being able to have a second opinion on just things in life like that was what I wanted to do. That made me and currently still makes me happy. It's not like a strategy or a thing that I'm doing. Like I am genuinely just kind of being myself. And I think a big part of that is working with people that I enjoy working with. I don't think I would have that approach if I was working with retirees because I don't really enjoy working with retirees. And so I think a big part of it, like I said, is just my personality and again the opportunity that I get to choose who I work with. And everyone I work with, I want to be able to view them as like friends. Like I want to be able to just call them and catch up as if they weren't clients. As we grow and scale, I don't know if that will always be the case. Ideally, I hope that it is, but that's sort of just my personal approach to being an advisor and being in this industry.
I mentioned earlier that I think that this type of work is the future of our profession.
Yeah.
And I think this type of work I think it's immune to the threat of AI replacing financial advisors.
Yeah.
I think that if anything, the advancements of all that technology is going to let us to do more of it because now we don't have to worry as much about managing the tax loss harvesting or the portfolios, and like the technology can do all of that, so we can spend more time having these conversations. And I think it's still very early. Obviously it's early in the number of advisors doing the work, but I also think it's early in individuals realizing that's what they want from a financial advisor. Because again, I said they've got to be ready. And for so long, they saw us as stockbrokers and investment professionals, and still people think that all financial advisors do is investments.
Yep.
Like they don't loop in the insurance planning, the estate planning, and the designing of lives. And ultimately, money touches everything. So there's no escaping the importance of understanding your finances. And I think having a good relationship with money, working through money stories you might grow up with, but then also understanding your values and how your money can align with that allows you to have a healthy relationship and then move forward and live the life that you want. And I don't know if, aside from a therapist, I don't know of any other profession that gets to have the conversations with people that would allow them to really really allow them to figure out what is it that they want from life. And then the difference between us and therapists is like where we can't go deep where a therapist can't go deep into the money side of things. And that's why, as I was kind of like doing the Santiago rebrand and figuring out the next 20 years of my career, like there was a period of time I'm like, well, when RLS wealth declines because my clients pass away and there's the natural attrition that goes on, I'll just won't be a financial advisor anymore. I'll do life planning and the coaching that I want to do. And then I realized, well, money touches everything. And if I'm competing with other life coaches, which I hate that term, they can't touch money. Mm-hmm. So if somebody likes me and I can help guide them, and I love that you use the word guide because I think that is more of what advisors are going to be. We're going to be guides and collaborators rather than like the answer people. But if I can be a good guide and help them, and now that we've created this awesome vision of their life and they know who they are, now I can go put this expertise of 20 years of financial advising on and blend the two together, which leads me to how do you blend together the emotional side, like the quote unquote therapy side of things with the technical? Tell me how you use Monte Carlo simulations to do this. Yeah, I wasn't going to let us not go there in this conversation. So the reason we're laughing about this is there was an exchange on LinkedIn where Sam was speaking to potential clients, and as financial advisors like to do, like it's just crazy in our profession. We have the best profession in the world. So many great people doing this work. But at the same time, financial advisors can be their own worst enemies. Advisors love to bicker with each other about what's the best model, what's the best fee structure, are you doing enough for your clients? They spend so much time dragging our business down amongst ourselves.
You know what that means, right? When you
What's
spend
that?
when you spend more time on other people's
like,
businesses.
Yes. So in this exchange, Sam is trying to using social media to grow, like educate and then grow his business, which is what you should do, and shows this Monte Carlo, and out of the woodwork, the peanut gallery comes in, not knowing any of the specifics, and obviously we're not going to disclose our full client situation on a social media platform. Like, we can't do that. Confidentiality, nor would we want our client's business out there, but we can use aspects of it in a confidential way to show how we can help people and how we can educate people who don't know about money. And in the comments, all these advisors are saying why this is wrong and not knowing all the details. And so anyways, I think that it's like, I wanted to call that out and just say, like, quit the bad behavior from my peers. But secondly, like, how do you, because it is emotional and technical. So we do need to use, and if you don't know what Monte Carlo simulation is, computer simulation, forecast possibilities of what could happen in the market. And the way we advisors use it is kind of a benchmark of, are we heading in the right direction? So it will spit out a percentage that says, of these 1,000 simulations, 96% of the time you hit your goal. And so the debate can be, how strong do you need to get your plan and what's the right number? And the truth is, we don't know. Because first off, these are all simulations. And secondly, like 70%, like, what does that mean? We can use it to say, okay, we have a strong plan, we need to watch it. So anyways, the thought is, if you have a high percentage, like, you're leaving money on the table that you could have spent. The book Die with Zero, like, they would tell you want like a 10% probability of success, so you die with zero. Most people don't want that. So anyways, how do you blend the Monte Carlo and the technical stuff with the personal, emotional side of things?
Before I dive into that last question about how do I blend the two, I want to touch on something you mentioned in terms of, like, being a life coach, and you hate that term. But I do think, and there was I think it was Charles Schwab, forgive me if I'm mentioning the wrong institution, but there was a research study that came out that said, because of consumer demands and what they want of a financial advisor, like, they don't care what we used to do in the past. They have certain needs now, and they think a financial advisor is supposed to do this. And that includes coordinating estate planning, right? Like, in what world does a financial planner or a financial advisor coordinate an estate plan, right? That was not something I think that was common before. They would just say, hey, you should just go to an estate planning attorney, let me know what information they need, and your estate plan was created. But according to Charles Schwab, they're saying that because of consumer demands and the needs and the wants that they have from their advisor, like, advisors are slowly becoming what they termed as integrated wealth coaches, where integrated life coach, I'm sorry, which is probably the same thing, where, you're doing the coordination of the estate planning, the life insurance, you're managing the investments, you're providing financial advice. You're doing all the things that helps align all the different moving pieces of their financial life, hence the integrated life coach. But you're also bringing in, well, what does all of this mean in the context of you being happy and you feeling fulfilled and feeling like you don't regret anything? Like, whether we're talking about financial planning or we're talking about investment decisions, I always like to frame things of which will bring the least regret, because we don't know, like, what will happen in the future, but we do know, like, hey, I would feel this way if this were to happen, or that way if something else were to happen. And so I find that method is pretty helpful. So I do agree that more financial advisors will start to look like life coaches, but will still have the capability to manage assets, provide financial advice, and be an actual financial advisor.
I just hate the life coach term, because I think about people who call themselves on life coaches on, like, social media, when, like, they're not. Like,
Yeah.
So I don't like that. And also to me, I do like guide better. To me, a coach draws up the X's and O's and tells you what to do. And yes, some of our job as a financial advisor is to tell clients you need to do this. But like the approach that I want to take and why the coach doesn't really line up with me is I want the planning process to be more collaborative. Because as you know, and people should know by now, like there's not one right way to approach the financial plan. Again, the whole conversation around Monte Carlo simulation, there's not one right way to do it. So what I would rather do is sit down from the client and say, okay, you're thinking of doing this thing. Tell me how you're planning on accomplishing that. Let me listen. Let me let them know what they don't know that they don't know about that thing and offer up some pros and cons of that. And then I know, because I've been doing this for 20 years, I can probably come up with one or two other options on the spot. And options that have their own pros and cons. And then maybe I need to go do some research and let me see if there's anything else I'm missing. Come back and we have a conversation. So I can look at my client and say, hey, here are 4 ways that you can accomplish your goals. None of them will blow you up. Each of them have their different pros and cons. Some are better than others for different respects. But here's what our options are. Here's what I would advise you to do based off of our conversations and what I know about you. And this is what I think you should do. I might even say, hey, this is what I would do, just in case you're curious. Doesn't mean you have to, but like I would advise B, I would maybe do D. Here's the reasons why, just to give them more information and empower them. And then going into my spiritual world, like put it back on them and say, what does your gut say? What is intuition telling you is the right direction? Because I believe that is going to steer you in the right direction. So I can look across from them and say, I know none of these are bad. If you have been educated to know why one might be better than the other in certain circumstances, but you choose this one because it more aligns with you or it feels better, then you've made the decision and let's move forward with that. And what I've learned over 20 years is when people feel like they're the ones in control of their decisions, they're more likely to own it, which means they're going to stick with it. And also, if it doesn't work out to the way we thought it would because of things we can't control, they're not mad at me because I just helped them make the decision that they thought was best. And so I want to be more of a collaborator rather than a coach. But to say like, I'm your financial collaborator, like no one's going to get what that is.
I agree. I agree with everything you just said. And it kind of brings me back to actually one of our clients when we did our rebrand. They mentioned, this is an exact quote from them. They said, it's like therapy. Samuel understands our financial needs because he knows us. He helps us see how to make what we want a reality. And I think if you're only focusing on the numbers side, the Monte Carlo simulations, the investment returns, like you miss this very important aspect of forming a lifelong relationship. Ultimately, that's what I'm building towards, and I think you do miss that piece. But when it comes back to, how do I decide when to be technical and how do I decide when to be, focus on the life planning or emotional aspect of things. And I think it ultimately comes down to the client. I think there are some clients, like I generally like to lead with education. And so that doesn't necessarily mean I'm being technical, but I am going to explain to them, hey, what's the difference? This is an ETF. Let me explain what's the difference between an ETF and a single stock. Why are we choosing ETFs over single stocks? Well, what's the difference between ETFs and direct indexing? What's the difference between permanent life insurance and whole life insurance, or permanent life and term? And what do I think is the best for you and why? Like, those are the conversations I tend to lead with, but then always follow up with like, based on what we've discussed, based on what I've learned about you, based on what I know you want out of your life, here's what I think is best. And like you said, but the decision is yours to decide, which route makes the most sense for you. And so I think if I had to choose, I would say I'm probably like 60-40 or maybe even 70-30 on the life planning to like technical side of things. Like, as the technical things come in when we start talking about taxes and tax projections and like figuring out a strategy for like selling equity or exercising stock options. But the end goal is always to achieve a certain goal that's based on what we've discussed you want out of your life. And I think outside of like equity comp and taxes, I really do try to keep the technical stuff at minimum unless I know it's a client that is like hungry for information, hungry for education. They want to know like the underlyings of how this stuff works. A lot of my clients are software engineers, so we do get that type, but I think it definitely depends on the client and what they're looking for out of their relationship. Like you said, not everyone is ready for that from day one. So you really just have to go on a case by case basis.
All right, man. I think that's a good introduction to financial therapy, if you will. And it really, my hope for this conversation was to just put in front of people, non-advisors, or maybe advisors who don't know because they come from a world where they're not taught this stuff, that there is a different way to work with an advisor. And I think that changing the way you view money and changing how you use money and changing the vision of what you want and understanding you have more agency in your life can lead to more people seeking this type of advice. Like, you're still going to get the technical things, but let's make sure the technical things are actually leading to a life that you want to live. Because otherwise, either you're going to have regrets, or you have this awesome plan that you don't follow because there's no attachment to it. It's like it's not exciting to you. It's not what you want to do. So you're just not even going to follow through. So yeah, you have this nice report that says you have a probability of success, but you're not actually doing the things behind it because you don't have any reason really to, because the end goal doesn't light you up. It's not what you want. So hopefully this puts a new way of working with advisors in front of people, and they start reaching out to advisors like you or me or other people doing. There's tons of life planners. If you need help finding a life planner, reach out to me and I will, connect you to people who will do a good job based off of where you are. And if you're in the tech space, equity comp you have, Sam's your man. So like, I also want to promote my friend and make sure you find him as well. But any closing thoughts?
I always like to tell people who are looking for financial advisors that like you're going to find someone that is competent on your pain points. Like that is not as hard of a thing to find. The overwhelming majority of actual financial advisors and financial planners can solve that relatively easily. It's finding someone that you can be vulnerable with, someone that you could be trusting with, that you can be transparent with, that you can feel like you can let your guard down and like share things. And obviously that won't happen from day one, but you should be thinking about that when deciding when you want to work with someone. I mean, at the end of the day, you're trusting who's essentially a stranger to help you manage your life savings. And that's not like an easy thing to do. And so I think bare minimum is you should feel as though like this person actually cares about me and is invested on not just doing what it is I say I want to do, but also making sure that I actually know what it is I want to do, because many people don't. And that's much harder to figure out in practice than it is me just actually saying that. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing. That's what I tell all of our clients when they're deciding who to work with. That's most important to me. And yeah, I hope to see more advisors lean in this direction. I think the shift to life planning is super important, especially as like AI and all these things start to become more relevant in our industry.
Again, I think it's the future, and I'm naive enough to think that I don't think robots will be able to replace what we do from a. I mean, I think there will be enough people who always want to work with a human, one, and I just don't know if a robot will be able to pick up on like the silent energy that we can pick up from people. So somebody says something, but yet we can feel that that's not necessarily what they mean.
Yeah.
And I feel like that frequency is something that only another human being can receive. And if you're doing the work where you could have those conversations where you can pick up on those things and you can help people not just settle for the surface level, like I think that there's always going to be a need for a human being to do that. I could be wrong, but I think I'll be dead by the time that happens.
I do wonder though, like coming from a place where financial advisors were reserved for people who were ultra wealthy, or not ultra wealthy, but wealthy, sort of making it like a luxury, to now where it's sort of available to the masses because of like flat retainer fees and those sorts of things, going to a point where, okay, maybe it's not a cost barrier, but people prefer AI for like low level things, which ultimately then makes being a financial advisor or hiring a financial advisor a luxury again. Because I do think that there would be. I can't imagine someone with like a high net worth individual trusting a robot with that much money. Like I don't see it.
I mean, I have a business model in mind where there is an AI trained
We've talked
agent
about
of
this.
me
Yeah.
based off of my daily notes and
Hmm.
emails to clients. And so that like you could make it really low cost. So
Hmm.
somebody's not only on their own, all of the investment management, all the tax stuff can be run by the computer programs that are there. So for a really low cost, someone could get advice that is based off of what I would have said to help them make good decisions and take care of some of the finances. So now they do have an advisor that gives them more than what they would have on their own. I think we're
And we're kind
probably
of,
a few
and we're,
years away from that.
I think we're seeing that already. I
Well, I
mean,
think from like a compliance standpoint and
oh
from
yeah,
like,
from a
can we
compliance.
get the agents trained and can I personally have enough trust in the agent that it's
Yeah.
not going to slip up and say something wrong? But like, I think it'll be here. So you could charge $20 a month, $10 a month. Like,
I say we call Jason Wink since he just built this blue shirt thing. I say we give him a
yeah,
call and see what we need to do to get something like that for ourselves.
yes. All right, man. Well, I will let you get running. I know you have a meeting coming up and you got to get that before the kids get home, but I'm excited to have you as a part of the rotation. Looking forward to whatever the next conversation has for us. We'll see what comes up between now and then. And we'll always kick these off with a catch up. So we'll let people know what you'd been up to between this call and the next call and all that type of stuff and dive into something that I hope is relevant for the audience that will help them move closer to their authentic life, align their spirit, mind, body, and money, and all those good things. So appreciate you for taking the time and looking forward to the next one.
That sounds good, man. Thanks for
Hey,
having
where
me.
can I send
Always.
everybody so they can find you? Like, where do you want me to send them?
Yes, everybody, you can find us at Rora Wealth on Instagram and at Rora Wealth on YouTube.
Gotcha. I'll link to those in the show notes. That's how we podcasters do. All right, man. Appreciate it. And I will see you in the group text.
All right, man.